Hi everyone, my name is Thebe Magugu. Thank you so much for coming. So I am a women's wear designer based here in Johannesburg. I am from Kimberley originally, and my journey into fashion started really young. My mom says she used to find doodles of me drawing, fashion and dresses. And at that young age, like a dress is a red triangle on like a stick figure, but it's fashion nonetheless. And she says she always used to make sure that there was pen and paper around the house for me to start, exploring that side and drawing. The day we got DSTV was obviously the best day of my life because FTV came into things and it became sort of family tradition to watch the shows every season. So there was a lot of fashion all around, constantly, all the time. I took that a bit further when I got to high school. I started a little zine called Little Black Book, which covered fashion, covered photography and writing, and I got my friends involved in that, and that experience just further made me sure that this was the industry I wanted to go into. So I remember when I matriculated, I told my mom, okay, I'm going to Paris or London, like get me out of here. And she was like, that's great, but look around you, like how are we going to get you there? Which was a bitter pill to swallow, but it ended up, being quite a blessing. So I moved to Johannesburg to study fashion design, fashion photography, and fashion media at Lysoft, which took me about 3 years. And then after that, I did a few internships, and then I started my business, and I've been doing that ever since.
Okay. And now to see if this. Let's see if this will. Cedric, are you there? Cedric, are you there? Cedric.
Yeah, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Are you ready?
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to be here. My name is Cedric Mizero. I'm from Rwanda. I grew up in a small village called Gishoma in south of Rwanda. My journey in the fashion industry is different because I joined fashion in 2014, where I made it to come to Kigali, to the city of Rwanda, and people start to call me a fashion designer. They just decide that I'm a fashion designer. And then I took it as something that was very new for me. And I started to create, but without knowing what I was doing. But because of people around me, they keep pushing me, and I became a fashion designer. But while I was working in fashion industry, I was making clothes, I was making shoes, I was mixing different things, but I find my way that I could use fashion in different way of fashion. And then I decided to use fashion as a way that I would express myself. And then I decided that fashion could be a way for me to capture people's attention and then just tell them something. So for me, since 2016-15, I've been using fashion as a canvas where I paint my ideas, where I just tell people ideas, where I just put people together, create stories. And then I don't have a business. I don't own a business. I just use fashion in the way of just telling stories. Thank you.
Abby, are you good to go?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you. Okay. So my name is Doshi Shah. I'm a trained jeweler and silver. And essentially, I graduated from the School of Jewelry in Birmingham 2001. So that was almost a lifetime ago, it feels like. And then essentially proceeded to work in advertising for approximately just over a decade, about 12 years. And I came back to, I suppose, my creative path about 5 years ago. And essentially it's been growing since then. In terms of identifying within the parameters of fashion, I kind of consider myself more so to be a designer and an applied artist. But essentially using jewelry as I suppose the medium and the canvas. But yeah, that's me.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. So I'm curious, I'm keen to learn how your work situates itself within kind of or a broader historical lineage of fashion within your respective countries. So maybe we can throw this at you, Cedric, and then Amy can come in, and then maybe we can close off with you, Thebe. And I'm really hoping that this becomes a conversation as opposed to kind of Q&A session that is led by me. Yeah? So please feel free to augment, feel free to respond, interrupt, and converse with each other. Cedric, we're good.
Sorry, I didn't get you well. Could you please come again?
I'm curious to know how your work situates itself within a genealogy or a kind of historical lineage of fashion in Rwanda, in your case.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Like my work, like fashion industry, like in Rwanda, it's something new now. It's been there for maybe like where we are. It's been there maybe for 3-4 years, where the people start to know about fashion. People start to, because you know what happened in Rwanda after so our generation, that's the new generation after the genocide that's happened in 1994. After that, that's how like the new generation, so my age, the people who's trying to make something. So my work in fashion, it's still new. It's still like for the people who lives here, it's still something new that they still wondering, because it's something like fashion industry is something new in Rwanda. But there's people like my age who has business, who's making clothes, who has like brands, like who's trying to make something. And also we have, like our government have stopped second-hand clothes. So they are pushing so hard made in Rwanda. So now like we have a lot of people making things made in Rwanda. So which is very, very exciting for us now in Rwanda.
You want to go for it, Ami?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you talk about the historical context or the genealogy of fashion, I suppose, in our country. I think it does kind of go back to, I suppose, you know, we were colonized by the British for a number of years. We've been independent for about 50 plus years. And I think that so much of, I suppose, our style and approach to fashion and clothing is much more, it's definitely got a much more British sensibility. So it's a little bit more utilitarian, a little less extravagant. But in terms of the context of, I suppose, what I'm trying to do and a number of designers in Kenya are trying to do is essentially just really shifting and shaping perceptions of what fashion is within not only the African context, but also the context of our own country. And I don't think that that's just isolated to myself among the three of us. I think that so much of what we do is, as Cedric said, in a way about storytelling. So yeah, I think that, you know, the industry in Kenya is definitely growing, and it's evolving in its own way. But I think that the biggest challenge that we have is essentially in terms of support and access to funding and training and that sort of thing. So much of what we do is self-taught. Some of us have had, I suppose, the opportunity to study abroad and bring so much of that knowledge back. And yeah, so I think that it's yeah, it's interesting. It's a really exciting time to, I suppose, be an artist or a communicator of what's happening within our respective countries across the continent. So yeah.
So with like my work, I think there's quite a few components to it, but mainly there's I draw a lot from my cultural heritage. So I am Soto on one side and Tswana on the other, and I think between those two cultures, I find a lot of cultural and visual cues that sort of inform my work. Between the two, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of handwork, there's a lot of beading, and most importantly, there's a lot of storytelling actually, as both Cedric and Ani said. And I like to think that I continue parts of that within my own work. But I also will say that I think I always try and take those cues and work them in a way that's quite contemporary. Like if I look at how for example I dress, like I'm Soto, but I could never wear a Basotho blanket for my day to day. But I will wear a Basotho printed parka because that's functional. You know, I believe that culture should really modernize to like keep up. So I try and merge the two together.
Thanks for that. So the next question concerns the three of you in the context of the International Fashion Showcase, which was shown at Somerset House in February this year. I guess on the one hand, we would be curious to know what might be your personal reflections, what was your experience like, but more importantly, connected to that, what kind of narrative were you looking to take over to London, considering the attention that fashion from the continent is receiving on the global stage? Who wants to go first? Abby, do you want to go?
Okay, I'll go first. I think that there was, I almost feel that IFS was kind of split into two components. I think that there was definitely an element of the business development that was run by the London College of Fashion, and obviously it culminated in the presentation at Somerset House. I think both components are equally important, but in terms of actually our presentation at Somerset House, we wanted to essentially narrate, we wanted to use salt specifically as a material and as a tool to, I suppose, narrate the story about our kind of post-colonial legacy in a way. So in terms of designing the space and the film and also the pieces. So it was really interesting because a lot of the research that we did essentially made sure that what we presented was rooted in the space of Somerset House, because we discovered that the Somerset House, and actually the West Wing specifically, was the home of the UK Salt Office in the 1700s for a period of almost 100 years. And essentially what they were responsible for was collecting the domestic and colony taxes on salt, which became one material that was, I suppose it's so essential to life, becoming a form of currency and a form of power play as well. So it essentially made it very, very easy for us to ground what we did at Somerset House, ground the pieces in this space. And, you know, I mean, I suppose in terms of what we wanted to bring to Somerset House was a little bit of our own story as a country. And yeah, I think that it was quite important to use, I suppose, the premise of fashion to be able to tell that story in a very, very different way.
So yeah, my experience during the IFS process and Somerset House was really incredible, because it wasn't just about the exhibition that came in the end. It really, I mean, the IFS process started last year, mid last year, around possibly even around April, and it was really about equipping young design, like the designers selected with like information and the skills they read, like they need to navigate the fashion industry. I think there were about 7 units which dealt with things like production and, you know, your brand DNA and sourcing, you know, things a lot of young designers need to, you know, going forward in their brand. So I was really grateful for that part, because that's things I've now integrated into my own sort of brands. And in terms of my installation, I titled it Dawning, and it was really a celebration of the progress South Africa has had these past few years. Yes, I know we have our set of problems, but I don't know if all of you have seen the exhibition through the VR set, but it is three ladies who are sort of suspended in the air, sitting around a table, and there's this creed that comes down from the table into the room. So that creed is the new constitution, the one post 94, and I thought it's really special that, you know, it's now become one of the most progressive constitutions in the world. And the three ladies around the table was just my way of saying that now more than ever, I think women are really taking the leading, like, key positions within the country. I think it was, I don't know if it's this year, we've gone from 17th place to 3rd place of women, like best women representation in the world within Parliament. So I thought that, like, things like that are really important to celebrate. And in fact, a person who came to the exhibition was Thebe Tambo, who's the High Commissioner of London, who was Ora Tambo's daughter. And she was saying that it's not actually just now that women are on the stage. It's like, it seems like it's been something that's been there for South Africa to really take the lead in certain issues. So that was what my exhibition space tried to deal with.
My experience in the IFS, it was an amazing, like, it was the part of being with 16 designers, very talented, for the first time, like, sitting with people who knows what is fashion, who, you know, like, who've been through, like, process of making things, like, being there. It was an amazing part of me being in IFS. And so I learned a lot. Like, I remember the first time that I saw Thebe's works, and I was like, wow, it feels like we had like a connection somehow. I saw Amis, I was like, wow, is she African? You know, I was like excited, and it was overwhelming for me to just be there. I was like, wow. And then I went back home. I was like, what can I do I have people, I have a place. What can I do? Like, then to present my work, what should I come with? And I was like, you know what? I would like just to tell them a simple story, but in that story that I wanted to share with people, I wanted to hide at the back. So I wanted to have a room in the Somerset House where you will enter in the room, but there's stories. Each piece had different stories. So for me, I called it Dreaming My Memory. It was a memory that I have from my village where I grew up, where my mom's live and everyone's still in the village. And then I was like, wow, it would be nice if people around me, like friends first, like these designers will know my story, how I live. And then so the world could know. And then I used fashion just to tell them that story. So when you came in my exhibition in Somerset House, there was these 4 pieces where it was also a celebration of women as well, because I always work with the women. All my past work it been about women. So it was celebration, but under celebration was storytelling. I was communicate something. There was this piece made out of medicine capsule. It was about the access we have on things like access we have but not educated to. So it was more about how we consume medicine in the village, but we don't know anything about medicine. The distribution itself, it's written in English. My mom, she would never read English. So it was about this hidden story in a beautiful way, a presentation of a beautiful way. So I present 4 pieces that each piece will tell different stories.
Let's see where this goes. how did each of you experience each other's works?
For me, I was very amazed with. I mean, Thebe, I saw him with this. Like we have the first work of Thebe that I see was this women standing. I don't know the name in English. The Kirkle, Thebe, how you call them?
Scarecrows.
And I was amazed, and then I was like, wow, like there was a connection there, and it reminds me so much my village, because we use these things in the farming part, and then reminds me so much home. You know, I was just amazed to see their work. I think they're amazing. Ami, I mean, like, you know, guys, I've tell you a lot of time.
I think I was so inspired by like both, particularly Cedric and Ami, like both their imagination and like the execution in which they did things. Like with Cedric, you have to, like, I can't even describe it. He had this massive sculpture of a mannequin in a dress, but if the closer you come to it, you realize that it's not fabric, it's actually little poles that he attached by hand to the fabric. I don't know how many poles you used for that.
A lot of pairs, a lot.
So yeah, the attention to detail was just so incredible. And with what Ami does, that she takes like sort of, the word is not rocks. How can I say, like the green stone, the green stone you use in your work?
Well, so actually within the exhibition itself, it wasn't actually stone. It was we used a solution of salt and cupric nitrate to create these kind of these textures. It's like a form of erosion and a process called patination. And
shape and how you treated it to look so like feminine and beautiful, and for it to capture your story so beautifully, I think that was really inspiring. So that getting to see how they take something in like conceptual, like in the conceptual space, and bring it into something physical is really just mind blowing.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think that just this, it was obviously being in and amongst some incredible designers, and having the opportunity to almost be free to push boundaries, to really push yourself in terms of your practice, the way that you approach your work, was for me was very, very exciting. And I feel that it's also helped influence the kind of work that I'd like to do in the future. I mean, the quality and the power of the installations literally at some point just brought me to tears. It was so beautiful, and also there was this element of actually having the 2 weeks of residency with this group of designers, where you essentially become a family. You're sharing ideas, and I think that I agree with Cedric. I agree with Thebe that, you know, just the opportunity to be around an incredible group of people, but each in their own right extremely talented and also influential in terms of the narrative of their own respective countries. I mean, each one of us, I suppose, I mean, came from different countries, but we had different stories. And when you saw the exhibition in space, you could see not only the story of the designer on a personal level, but also the story of their respective homes. And that was very, very powerful, to actually use space, to use different mediums, to almost elevate fashion to a form of art. And I thought that was extremely beautiful.
I mean, it's quite clear that this was a kind of defining or a very definitive turning point for your careers, and as well as your practice, I guess. So would you talk a bit about how the experience, the residency at Somerset House has shifted your praxis, both intellectually and aesthetically, considering that you were in this melting pot of designers from all over the world, right? And you're kind of moving into that space, the kind of very politically as well as aesthetically charged piece of messaging. How has that experience now shifted, and what informs how you operate now as a designer, as a thinker, and as an artist? Thebe is ready to go.
Well, I think so. I think on the practical side, I think it's things that as soon as I came back to South Africa, I immediately sort of integrated into my business. So when I started like my brand, it was probably a year right after I graduated, which in hindsight was so premature because I don't think I had enough of like the skills I should have really honed in, you know. But through the IFS process, with those 7 units that really dealt with every single step of a young designer's sort of what a young designer should know, I immediately brought all those elements into my business, and it's really helped. Intellectually, I think, you know, being at Somerset House and getting people's reactions to the exhibition and the information I told them about being South African, you know, my heritage and the culture, they were just so surprised at it all because they didn't know. So like, instead of changing it, I think it's just made me more want to just express it more. You know, I don't think intellectually my work is going to change. I just realized the importance of authentically speaking about it and showing people what it is to be South African, operate within this.
For me, when I come back to Rwanda, I was a bit depressed because I was worried about the business part. I was like, oh my God, why? You know, I was just worried about that. Then when I just like think through like what others are doing, and also like the process that we went through, the course we had about business, and then I was like, the project definitely pushed me to stay who I was, like to be me, and then just, you know, bring something that was just from me. So they pushed that side of me. They just showed me a way of doing things on how I wanted to do it without word, with anything else. I know it's right. Thebe, right?
Yeah.
Thebe, there's people there.
There's so lucky.
There's people there around. Oh, there's people. Oh my God.
I think in terms of, I suppose, the approach to work, I think that what IFS did do was essentially, I think the word that I would use is bravery. I think that the process of creating is kind of plagued with self-doubt. I think that, you know, it's not isolated to the creative industries, but I think that so many of us who are working as their own brand and trying to, I suppose, narrate their own stories, just constantly have those points where you're just like, is this the right thing? And I think that what IFS did do, the whole process of the business units and also the curation and installation of the exhibition at Somerset House, what it taught was an element of following your convictions, but then also providing some sort of framework in which to navigate through your business. And I thought that was, both of those elements were extremely important. In terms of the praxis, I suppose, it's moving forward. I think that there's definitely a very strong element of conceptual practice and art practice within what I do, and that's something that I'm actually following much more closely as a component of my business. So you have, I suppose, the more artistic and creative practice, and then you have the design practice, which essentially is your bread and butter. But your art practice and exploration of process essentially becomes a pathway to disseminate some of those concepts into pieces that are more commercial. And I think that was a huge shift for me in terms of my business as well.
Interesting. Just something to add about what you had said, that I think we also, a big thing we learned was to also tread the line carefully between, like, following our concept, like our conceptual work, and then this idea of sellability. And I know there's quite a few young designers like in the audience, so one big thing that I took away from that was, in the past I used to just like make clothes and make this like big collection, but like through this process I also learned the fact that you have to really plan for things and plan a proper range plan that can appease the conceptual side of what you're trying to say, but also make sure that it makes sense for your business. It's no use making this massive collection that only 9 things from which will sell. So I think we learned a lot about things like that.
Cool. So I'm sure I'm not the only one with questions. It's quite a full house, so I have to be really careful how I handle this. By a show of hands, how many questions are currently bubbling in the audience? 1, okay, 2, 3. All right. So perhaps let's take 3 questions and deal with them kind of in one round, and then I'll take another set of questions. Okay. So start.
My question is, Thebe, you've mentioned previously how your collections, so far, the themes they have taken have been university modules and subjects. And I was curious, in context of the first question regarding the genealogy, like your collections in the genealogy of South Africa, as well as the second question, as well as your second answer, where you were speaking about the importance of women and their impact. What is it about academia that speaks to the Thebe Magugu brand in context of those answers?
Do I respond yet?
Yes. My name is Brent Mart, and my work primarily as a curator. And I was quite interested and quite inspired by the way all 3 designers refer to the collections kind of historically and politically, kind of using kind of like formative moments in that country, that informs the collection. So I think that makes huge strides, and I find it very inspiring in terms of decolonizing the sector of fashion. And I'm also quite interested in that sense in how all 3 designers, if we have time for that, use the aesthetics of what you do, the visual, the look of it, the aesthetics, and how that actively challenges the aesthetics of fashion using an African aesthetic.
Hi everyone, hi designers. My question is for all 3 of you, and it's about the fact that you've all spoken to how the IFS program taught you so much about the commercial application of your work, and that there are things you learned. But I'm wondering what conclusions you came to specifically about your brands when it comes to that relationship that you now have to create and manage between the conceptual applications of your work and the commercial applications of your work?
Thank you for all your questions. But to answer yours, really, like, I've constantly just been surrounded by women. It was my mother, my aunt, my grandmother, and then in high school and then in college, I helped minds who also happened to be, and sort of the common denominator in all that was the fact that they all taught me something. So that sort of informed that idea that I actually feel like I want to do the same with my brand, and the easiest way I could do that was by adopting that model that sort of said that with every passing season, I'll have like a collection that deals with a certain sort of university subjects, but a certain university subject, but that still relates to what I want to like say about what I want to say that particular season. So that's how I correlated this idea of something of academia and the messaging within my own brand.
Okay. Well, let's see. I'll try to reframe your question, all right? And please correct me if I veer off. So you spoke about decolonizing fashion, kind of how some of these designers embodied and brought that forward through the political charge of their work as well as the aesthetical charge of their work, correct? And also starting to integrate and think about how materials can start to carry those through, right? And you wanted the designers to reflect a bit on that process. Is that clear, Cedric, Ami?
No, for me, not really.
Somewhat. I think I missed some of what you said, Russell, but maybe you can just repeat it very quickly. Sorry.
Sure. So thinking about how your work and the designs that you carried across to London started to embody and bring to the focus some of the political nature and kind of the political history of your respective countries. So how that was carried aesthetically as well as through the narrative or the conceptual framework of what you brought over. So asking for you to reflect a bit more about that, correct? Yes? I mean, that's the best I could do.
I think I understand the question. I'm going to try and answer it as best I possibly can. I think that it all started off with the conceptual framework for the presentation, which we actually had to submit at the process and point of actually applying to get into IFS, if I'm not wrong. So I think that the conceptual narrative of our stories was necessary right from the outset. So it was almost decided that whatever was going to happen at the end of the presentation followed a very, very kind of fluid path in terms of concept and also how that translates into the physical. For me, it was a combination of academic research and also a lot of material research, process research as well. As I mentioned before, you know, the story around the space for Kenya was really using salt as a tool, as a material, and also almost as I suppose a political, religious, and social metaphor for this idea of power and submission. And and that there's a dichotomy in the material. So salt is innately essential for human life, for all life on Earth, but then it's also extremely destructive in some cases. So it was actually using that material to look in terms of process, look at kind of, you know, the idea of erosion and degradation. So what I did was essentially look at the process of patination using salt. And if you have had a chance to look at the installation and the work, then you'll see this very kind of rich, almost turquoise pigment on a number of the materials and the number of pieces. And conversely, also looking at and exploring the essential nature of salt. There was also the process of actually submerging materials in this hyper-concentrated salt solution and almost creating this quiet sense of alchemy. And I think that it's never, I don't think that the process of exploring a concept and coming to some sort of conclusion as an installation, it wasn't linear at all, not for me. It was very experimental, and I think that that's, you know, that's essentially part of the process. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but that was a little bit of the context of how our exhibition came to play.
Cedric, do you need me to repeat that for you?
I think Ami, she made me understand a bit about I didn't get the question well, but for me, the first idea was how fashion as a sweet word. How can I put something that could change people's life? You know, fashion. You know, and then I knew that there would be people who's gonna come just to see fashion. You know, so then so the material that I chose, of course, I did the research about everything that I've done. Had like a very proper research. Like for the medicine, I did like 1 month research. For the unity, I interviewed people. So I was working on the story that I already know, and then I already know the way to present them. So for me, it was the idea of just using fashion as a very sweet thing to do as a, you know, and then I tell them story using the political issues, being voiceless, you know. It was for me, it became so easy.
Cool. So here's an emergency announcement. Someone driving a blue Toyota Taz is blocking someone who's trying to leave. I'm not sure why that person wants to leave. But if you're driving a blue Taz, may I kindly ask you to move it to another place. I'm happy to take the final round of questions if there are some. There's one here. Any others? No. It means one of two things. All right, 2 questions. Okay, start with you.
Hello. What I'm interested in hearing about, Thebe touched on this a little bit, is the perceptions as African designers. What were the perceptions to your work and the ideas of what Africa is sort of in the West, and sort of the idea of like an exotic Africa and like this wilderness and like, I don't know, lion prints and zebra prints. How was your work perceived as African designers against sort of that idea that exists of what Africa is?
Hi, Dominic. I just wanted to ask more about having your own identity as a designer. If you wrote very saturated with a lot of voices. How have you guys been able to carve your own voice and your own aesthetic? And how do you incorporate that into every show that you have?
try and answer your question. I after this trip, and not only like I had taken during the IFS process, but just like my general travels, I found that people have a very lazy idea of what like South African fashion represents, and that's why I find it so important to like do what I do to like. My main mission with my brand is to showcase like my own culture and heritage, which is really important, but in a way that's really authentic, in a way that's contemporary and can hang anywhere in the world. And I think doing things that are, and I'm going to use that word quite a bit, like doing work that's quite authentic, it would be a way to slowly start showing people globally that this is what contemporary South Africa actually is. Not all about like this sort of print on print sort of fit and flare situation, but that we're capable of learning visual cues from our heritage and past in ways that could hang anywhere in the world.
Ami and Cedric, I've sent you the question. Yeah. So thinking about authenticity, how do you create authenticity and carry that across as a designer?
Could you say it again, please?
How, as a designer, do you craft an authentic voice and identity? And how do you carry that across in your work as a designer?
Ami, could you go first?
I think to be honest, I think it's a challenge for any designer who's not based in Europe or the US or quote unquote the West. I think that the biggest misnomer that the majority of people have is that that Africanness or what is African fashion or African design is essentially homogenized across the continent. I mean, there's an assumption that we are one country, not 51 separate ones, each with our own style and our own history and our own stories. I think that, I agree with Thebe in the sense that we are globalized. We're not, we're obviously trying to create design in a way that essentially reflects our own personal experiences and also what's happening around the world. So I think what a lot of designers do, and me specifically, is essentially use locally sourced materials, local techniques to almost reinvent this idea of what Kenyan design is, Kenyan fashion is, and what African fashion is. I think that each one of us individually has a very important place in retelling and almost educating what is happening within our respective countries from the Western or outside eye. So, I think that it's important, but I almost feel like it's kind of inherent in any designer who is operating within or across the continent.
Cedric, the spotlight is on you now. You can't run away.
I think Ami have said all. I think Ami should.
Okay, you want to go?
No, thank you.
Thank guys with me, Cedric. So, have you all experienced the exhibition digitally?
Sorry?
Have you guys gone online and experienced the exhibition yet?
Yes, I was checking the how you go through the thing. Yeah, it's so like I can't believe that. How did you do that?
I have a magic wand. Ami, what about you? How did the experience feel?
Yeah, it was actually really incredible. I spent very little time on my own exhibition, and I spent a lot of time on Thebe and Cedric's because obviously I knew my space very well, but I think that it was such an intense 2-week period of time that I didn't really have enough time to actually absorb other spaces. And also I felt that the video clips were really, really beautiful, and I actually told the story of the spaces very, very well. So it's very exciting that that the lifespan of the exhibition didn't just exist for 2 weeks, and that anyone can kind of experience that. So that was really awesome.
Digitally, I
Having
think,
seen it, it's
yeah.
3D.
I think that the two experiences are very different, but I think what connects the two is just how incredible it is, both digitally and having been there at the event, to almost get a glance of everyone's culture. Just being in each room, I learned I learned quite a lot just going through the exhibition spaces, like from Army's heritage, Cedric's heritage. So yeah, it was very, very exciting.
So as a way to draw towards a conclusion, I'd like to know what's next for all of you. Where to from here? Start with you, Ted.
Just in terms of
business.
Yes, okay. I think, and I feel like I've been equipped to start seriously looking at export and growing my brand. IFS, there was a week where we were introduced to everyone in the world of fashion. The buyers for the boutiques, all the influencers and the people who make fashion what it is, and having learned from them, I feel like my personal next steps is to just grow a brand that has that can sit in but produced from within Johannesburg. So I think I really am trying to make sure that and my resources within the country.
Cedric?
Yes, for me, what's next after knowing that everyone in the world are interested in fashion? I'm working on a movie, a film. I will call it a fashion show, but don't tell anyone. There will be nothing about fashion, but but I'm working on a movie, on a film, just to keep sharing my stories through fashion, as just capture people's attention. And yeah, that's next for me. I'm working on the film, 45-minute.
Ami, on you.
So I think that I'd just like to say, I think that it's one of the really beautiful things about kind of meeting this group of designers and interacting with this group of designers through IFS was also understanding that there's no cookie cutter approach to fashion or to running a creative business. And I think that for me, that also gave me I suppose, the gumption to just kind of establish the creative practice and use that as an exploratory tool for the design practice as well. So that's something that's essentially been implemented, and I'm also hoping to, I suppose, take my work into more of a gallery space and art space versus purely focusing on the fashion industry. So yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all for your presence, for your company. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, guys, for tuning in. I just want to quickly show you what the audience is looking like because you haven't seen it. So, oops. I have to be very careful.
Oh, wait. I'm trying to see if I know anyone. Let me see. Wow, there's a lot of people.
It is. It's incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, guys. And then as a closing, I'd like to hand over to Erica to thank you all for me.
Thank you. Thank you, Russell. Thank you, Thebe. Thank you, Ami and Cedric. And thank you, all of you. Thank you for those words about the digital exhibition. I think it's really a powerful moment that we've shared here today. That's something that lived 6 months ago or 4 months ago can continue to live, can be shared, can be visited, can be spread, and that these dialogues can continue around it. So I think a really, really exciting opportunity. We're not going to run away from the virtual or the digital. It's around us, it's all around us, so we're embracing it. And I think some of you have had the opportunity to look through it. Obviously with digital, we also have the challenges of download speed, so you might want to experience it at home. The SIBA did, SIBA and Odysseus, I think, did pass by Erin optometrists. And Erin optometrists in Mall have 2 VR sets here, but they also have a special on at the moment that if you have any eye work or optical work, you actually get a VR set yourself. So you can then go back to the Matterport link and then revisit it when your Wi-Fi is more sort of accessible, friendly. But as Ami says, there are a whole series of other films within the exhibition that we've added. There's a 360 film, there's some behind-the-scene films, there's some fashion show footage. So there's a whole range. There's an interview with Ami and Cedric each. So there's a whole series of activations and life of the exhibition. So I think thank you for everybody for believing in this, making it happen, for coming together, and hope to have a chat with you afterwards, and look forward to the next one. Thank you.